You have probably yawned once already today. Maybe reading that sentence. Ask anyone why and you get the same answer. Your body wanted oxygen, so it took a big breath. In 1987, someone finally tested that. They gave people air loaded with extra oxygen, then air loaded with carbon dioxide. The yawning did not change. Not a little, at all. Then they made people exercise until they were breathing twice as fast. Still, nothing. So a yawn is not your lungs asking for air. Whatever it is doing, it is not that. The explanation that replaced it is the one about cooling an overheated brain. You've probably heard that one too. It's in worse trouble than you think.
The cooling idea is not silly. It is the opposite. A brain runs hot. A yawn pulls a large volume of air across the roof of your mouth and stretches the jaw hard enough to move blood. Do that when the head is overheated and you have, in principle, a radiator. Researchers went looking and found what they expected. Yawns cluster around conditions that raise brain temperature. Faces measure cooler afterwards. The team behind that work says the most parsimonious explanation is that yawning is a thermoregulatory mechanism, which sounds settled, except that in 2010, 4 neurologists in Geneva and Bern did something nobody had bothered to do. Adrian Guggisberg and 3 colleagues collected every experiment ever run on yawning, then went through them asking one question: does this actually show a yawn doing anything? On the cooling idea, they wrote that there is currently insufficient evidence for a thermoregulatory effect, and that the hypothesis has explanatory gaps which seem difficult to close. One of their gaps is almost rude in how simple it is. A yawn interrupts normal breathing through the nose. Nasal breathing is already a more efficient way to move air, so the cooling yawn stops the better cooling in order to perform the worse one.
The two sides here are not the same size. The researcher defending the cooling theory is the researcher who proposed it. That is not a scandal. Science runs on people arguing for their own ideas. But it means the confident version you have heard has one champion, not a field. And then the review does something worse than disagreeing about brains and radiators. It goes down the list. The respiratory hypothesis, it says, is not supported by current experimental data. The arousal hypothesis, no specific arousing effect could be observed. Thermoregulation, insufficient evidence. Then the sentence the whole thing turns on. Theories ascribing a physiological role to yawning lack evidence. Not one theory, the category. Every explanation in which a yawn is something your body does for your body.
One thing about yawning has actually been demonstrated. There is one answer, and everybody already knows it. Yawns spread. That is not a hypothesis. It is the effect that keeps replicating while the others fail. And the reason everyone gives for it is that you catch yawns because you are empathetic. In 2014, Alex Bartholomew and Elizabeth Cerulli at Duke set out to find the empathetic yawner. They tested 328 people. They measured empathy, they measured intelligence, they measured time of day. None of it predicted who caught a yawn. The only thing that did was age, and age explained about 8%. Their own words are that the trait is stable and largely unexplained. So the one demonstrated effect of yawning is social, and the popular explanation for that effect just failed its largest test.
You might reasonably say this video has spent 4 minutes telling you nobody knows anything. That is not what happened, and the difference matters. 3 things were said, and they are not the same thing. The oxygen answer is experimentally dead. Someone ran the test, and it failed. The cooling answer is contested. Real measurements, real objections, argument ongoing. And contagion is demonstrated but unexplained, which is the most interesting state a fact can be in.
Collapsing all three into a one confident sentence is what every retelling of this does.
Yawning appears in most vertebrates from before birth to old age. In Durham, Nadia Riceland pointed an ultrasound at 15 unborn children and counted. They yawn in there, in a place with no air to want. A behavior that old, that universal, doing something we cannot name. The reviewers ended with a sentence more careful than any headline about yawning has ever been. We might have to get used to the idea that yawns have a primarily social rather than physiological function. Get used to the idea. Not proven, not settled, just where the evidence points, stated by people who checked. You have probably yawned once already today. If anyone was in the room, that was not only your business.